Coming up next, they had the talent and they had the songs and they had their shot at superstardom. But for these artists, something went off the rails. Dead wrong at exactly the wrong moment, leaving us to wonder what might have been. Today, we're counting down 8 bands and solo acts who seem destined for massive enduring careers, but for reasons ranging from self-sabotage to tragedy to bad timing, it never happened, including a perfectionist frontman who actually destroyed millions of dollars worth of his own recorded music. He just felt like it didn't sound authentic enough. Yeah, he physically destroyed all of these and no one will ever hear them. What about the female artist who ruined her career with an out-of-control acceptance speech at an award show? After that, her career stalled because her label refused to release her latest album. And then thousands of fans mailed apples to the label's headquarters in protest. Yeah, the fruit apple. Find out why. Plus the mysterious hospital cover-up that robbed us of what could have been rock's greatest frontman. It's our latest episode of One and Done coming up on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, we're counting down 8 music acts that were primed to go big time for a long time. These are bands and musicians who should have been a lot bigger than they were, but they stalled out for various reasons. They had 1 or 2 big albums and then they were done. We did this once before. You asked for more, so here it is. Coming in at number 8, we're going to start off the countdown with a London-based band named Johnny Hates Jazz. These guys formed in 1985 and feature vocalist Clark Datchler, keyboardist Calvin Hayes, and bassist Mike Nacito. For a couple of years, they worked the London circuit, refining their sound, a slick blend of electronic pop and emotional depth. Later dubbed as sophistopop, it's kind of like yacht rock, term they came up with later. In March of '87, they released Shattered Dreams, and the song absolutely exploded. Hit top 5 across the UK, throughout Europe, and all over Asia. The world could not get enough of this song. By 1988, Shattered Dreams finally conquered America. It went all the way to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and went to number 1 on the AC chart. If you remember, their debut album was called Turn Back the Clock. That was released on January 11th, 1988, and immediately shot to number 1 in the UK. They kept the UK singles coming with 3 more top 20 hits. There was the anti-war anthem, I Don't Want to Be a Hero. There was Turn Back the Clock, the title track, and Heart of Gold. On their home turf, these guys were on fire, and in the US, Shattered Dreams was a huge hit. Turn Back the Clock, it peaked at number 56 on the Billboard 200, not great, but they did score a second US top 40 single. I Don't Want to Be a Hero reached number 31. They were primed for big things here, especially since Shattered Dreams was such a huge hit. Right at the peak of their success, it all fell apart. Clark Datchler abruptly quit to pursue a solo career. He wanted to get on to the next thing. He only released 1 album. Nacito and Hayes were completely blindsided and they were devastated. They lost their frontman and chief songwriter whose voice and songs defined the project. Now, Clark would later say that he made a wrong-headed premature decision to go, for the band, to quit the band when he did. But, Datchler's departure created a deep wound, and he and Mike Nacito didn't speak for 21 years. Datchler chose not to fight for the band name, and Nacito and Hayes regrouped with Phil Thornley. And he was the vocalist for a second Johnny Hates Jazz LP called Tall Stories. It dropped a lot later in 1991, but failed to place on the US or the UK charts. As for Datchler, he didn't fare any better. He released his solo album Radiance in November in 1990. His single Crown of Thorns, that stalled out at number 100 on the UK charts. It was not well received by critics. Actually, Melody Maker called it a blow-dried, bedridden piece of Phil Collins-esque fakery. Yeah, ouch. Stateside, the song was completely unnoticed. Note to self, when your debut album is a massive hit, don't go solo and don't get another singer. So fast forward to 2010, after decades of pursuing individual projects, Clark Datchler and Mike Nacito buried the hatchet. They actually reunited, and in 2013, they released a third Johnny Hates Jazz album, Magnetize. The title track reached number 32 on the UK indie charts. In 2018, they celebrated the 30th anniversary of Turn Back the Clock with a special edition featuring new acoustic versions of every track. Sophistopop Unplugged, I guess, as they call it now. Giving me nothing but shattered dreams. Then in 2020, they dropped their fourth album, Wide Awake, and in 2024, Johnny Hates Jazz completed a sold-out headline UK tour, their very first in 36 years. But man, timing is everything. These guys had the talent, but naturally made a massive career miscalculation, and had they stayed together, I think Johnny Hates Jazz would have been big. All right, for the number 7 spot, we're heading back to 80s London again. This time we're talking about the dance rock outfit, the Escape Club. Do you remember these guys? This band formed back in 1983 out of 2 other bands, the Expressos and Mad Shadows. The lineup consisted of Trevor Steele on vocals and guitar, John Holiday also on lead guitar, Johnny Cristo on bass, and Milan Zakovica on drums. Their debut album, White Fields, that came out in 1986. From there, the band toured the UK supporting bands like Big Country and The Alarm and began building a loyal following. However, their first single, Rescue Me, it didn't catch on and their label EMI was ready to drop them. But David Munns, the CEO of EMI at the time, gave them one more shot. He said, you know what? There better be a hit on this next album or you're done. And for their second album, they definitely found their hit. The guys took a big risk though. They leaned into dance grooves and they created a rock dance hybrid. The album had the number 1 hit, Wild Wild West, on the album of the same name from 1987. But you know, the Escape Club, they weren't as well received in the UK. Neither the song or the album actually placed on the charts there. This may have been part because the music video got blacklisted though. Oddly enough, the video featured all kinds of floating body parts, mostly arms and legs without torsos. It was a carnival funhouse mirror effect and it really weirded people out. Said John Holiday, and I quote, "Yes, it was a very strange video, but at least it provoked a reaction. Most videos are just like commercials. This one made people talk. Some people do think it's dirty. I think it's all in the mind. There are all these women with no head, no torso. How could anyone find that the least bit stimulating?" I kind of agree with him. Two more singles followed after Wild Wild West. Shake for the Chic, that one hit number 26, and Walking Through Walls made it to number 81. Now in 1981, they released their second album, Dollars and Sex. The first single, Call It Poison, that went to number 28, decent, but not the hit that they were looking for. Then came I'll Be There. Written late one night after a friend's wife died, the sentimental ballad connected with audiences for sure and climbed to number 8, their second top 10 hit. Think of me, and I'll be there. But you gotta remember, fashion was changing faster and the Escape Club, they wouldn't be able to keep up. Their Atlantic Records deal was up, and despite selling millions of records with 4 big hits, they weren't financially well off at all. Trevor Steele said that by 1992, they felt like they'd made a lot of people a lot of money, but saw very little of it themselves, which bred frustration and made it hard to justify continuing at all. Ultimately, the band's trajectory flattened and the members began drifting apart. I think the Escape Club had the potential to be a lot bigger, but they were ruined by a really bad contract, and it just never happened for them after that, though they have done a few gigs here and there since then. All right, before we get to number 6, I do want to remind you to pick up your Vintage Years Collection shirt. I've got the 1991 on. Got a special deal running through the holidays. Get it below or right up here at the link. All right, coming in number 6, I got Fiona Apple.
They make their way across the universe.
Growing up in New York, young Fiona Apple discovered music was her lifeline. Her stepfather introduced her to the Beatles while her mother schooled her in jazz. But it was the poetry of Maya Angelou that really shaped her, giving voice to feelings she struggled to express after enduring trauma at age 12. As a young girl, she was already writing her own songs, channeling isolation and pain into something truly beautiful. The path to stardom began at a Christmas party in 1993. Clean Slate Records owner Andy Slater overheard a demo tape Fiona had recorded on a cheap tape recorder in her bedroom and immediately signed her. But instead of rushing her into the studio, Slater gave her 2 full years to write and record at her own pace so she would find herself. The result was a revelation, an album called Tidal. It was released in July of '96, and it made an instant splash. The album entered the Billboard Top 100 while Fiona built buzz opening for Chris Isaak on tour. 2 singles, The Haunting Shadow Boxer and the breakthrough hit Criminal, earned rave reviews. People started comparing her to Alanis Morissette, but Fiona, she was her own thing. Everything from there was pointing towards superstardom for Fiona.
I've been a bad girl.
Title went platinum, and in 1997, she won Best New Artist at the MTV Awards. However, it was there that Fiona gave her infamous career killer acceptance speech. In it, she declared that the world was bullshit and urged viewers not to model their lives after celebrities, which in a lot of cases is sound advice.
This world is bullshit. And you shouldn't model your life. Wait a second.
The problem was it became an instant media flashpoint, and it stunted her early mainstream momentum. Major outlets started to paint her as volatile and ungrateful, even crazy. Fiona, she later recalled feeling miserable and widely hated because of how the speech was framed at that point. This contributed to her uneasy relationship with fame. Fiona's second album, When the Pawn... dropped on November 9th, 1999. The title, which was actually a poem that was 444 characters long, it would be mocked forever by the press. And subsequently, the album's reception wasn't as favorable as her debut at all, although she did get a number 8 alternative hit out of it, Fast As You Can.
Baby, scratch me out, free yourself fast as you can.
But Fiona's third album, Extraordinary Machine, that may have been the nail in the coffin for her commercially. When Fiona finished it in 2003, her label Sony had concerns and they refused to release it. The following year, bootleg copies somehow began circulating online, and a grassroots movement called Free Fiona emerged, with Fiona's supporters mailing in thousands of apples to Sony headquarters. They demanded the album's release. Now, eventually, Fiona's Extraordinary Machine was released 2 years later, and against all odds, it went to number 7 on the Billboard 200. However, her momentum had stalled from there, and Fiona Apple, who could have been one of the biggest female artists of her generation, she fell into complete cult status. Take a second to mention our sponsor. Like some of us, we plan our gifts early, but in reality, we're blasting Springsteen Santa Claus is coming to town on December 23rd and praying the mall still has something that says, I care. But this year, Aura Frames makes you look like you planned it all along. Whether it's a photo of mom dancing in the kitchen or your kid's first guitar solo, this frame turns those moments into front row seats to memory lane. You can preload it with unlimited photos and videos, add a message, and it ships in a gorgeous gift box. No wrapping paper required. It's personal, it's powerful, and honestly, it's the easiest way to win the holidays without breaking a sweat. Because you can't wrap togetherness, but you can frame it. Right now, go to auraframes.com and get $35 off their best-selling Carver mat frames named #1 by Wirecutter when you use promo code ROCK at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code ROCK. This exclusive deal is just for you and it won't last long. Frames sell out fast. Terms and conditions apply. All right, for number 5 on the countdown, I gotta go with Greg Alexander, who for a fleeting moment was the New Radicals. Effectively a one-man band, Greg Alexander was the vocalist, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, and producer on the New Radicals album, Maybe You've Been Brainwashed Too. Growing up in an eastern suburb of Detroit, Alexander was drawn to soul and rock and roll. But everything changed when he snuck into an R-rated movie as a teenager, Purple Rain. Watching Prince perform Let's Go Crazy and the Beautiful Ones hit him like a lightning bolt. In that moment, he knew exactly what he was going to do. He was going to run away to California, and that summer, Greg told his parents that he was leaving to become a rock star. His mom could tell that he was dead serious, but his dad just said, well, make sure you're back by September for school if nothing has come together. Pretty cool. At the age of 16, he signed a production deal with A&M Records in Hollywood. 3 years later, in 1989, he released his debut album, Michigan Rain. But the timing was terrible. The label got caught up in a polygram takeover and the album disappeared without any promotion. Then in 1992, Greg tried again with Epic and his album Intoxifornication. But grunge was dominating the airwaves and his style just didn't fit. The album flopped. Then came the break that he'd really been waiting for, Michael Rosenblatt, head of A&R at MCA Records, wanted to sign him. This deal gave Greg the budget and the artistic freedom that he'd always dreamed of. He created a one-man band called New Radicals and poured everything into his album, Maybe You've Been Brainwashed Too. Of course, led by the single, You Get What You Give, one of the best songs of its time. Legend has it that the song came to Greg in a dream where he heard music drifting from a neighbor's house. Walking inside, he found Joni Mitchell just sitting there. Later in real life, Joni Mitchell would actually call You Get What You Give one of her favorite songs. Pretty wild. Now, at first listen, the song feels like pure joy. Catchy hooks, uplifting chorus. But you dig deeper and you'll find Greg taking shots at health insurance companies, the FDA, Wall Street bankers, and the war on drugs.
Health insurance, rip-off lying, FDA, big bankers buying.
Looking back, he admitted weaving all that into a pop song was naively crazy, but he also included a test. That spoken word bridge calling out Beck Hansen, Courtney Love, and Marilyn Manson as fakes.
Fashion shoots with Beckett Hansen, Courtney Love, and Marilyn Manson.
He wanted to see if the media would focus on his political message or get distracted by some celebrity gossip. Any guesses at which one they chose? Of course, it was the gossip.
Come around, we'll kick your asses.
Released in October of 98, You Get What You Give exploded in early 1999. It hit number 1 in Canada and New Zealand, number 5 in the UK, and number 36 on the Hot 100. But it went to number 1 in the adult alternative chart. The album was selling like hotcakes, and Greg began touring with the Goo Goo Dolls in April. Everything pointed toward a breakout album for his career. But then in June, just as the second single, Someday We'll Know, was about to drop, Greg shocked everyone by disbanding New Radicals.
Why the sky is blue, someday we'll know why.
In a press release, he later said, I'd lost interest in fronting a one-hit wonder to the point that I was wearing a hat while performing so that people wouldn't see my lack of enthusiasm. He just hated the touring grind, and he hated schmoozing with radio people. Just not his bag. The New Radicals would no longer record, promote, or perform. And just like that, it was over. Greg retreated to London, and then came back to focus on songwriting and producing behind the scenes. He co-wrote Santana's Grammy-winning The Game of Love, and he penned hits for Ronan Keating, Maroon 5, and surprisingly Hanson, the same band he called out in You Get What You Give. Although the New Radicals could have been a true alternative pop powerhouse, just wasn't what Alexander wanted. Instead, the act became the definition of one and done.
Don't let go, I feel the music in you.
Coming in at number 4, I got Nick Van Eat and the Crew, Cutting Crew. The band's story starts with a bar napkin packed in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Nick Van Eat was touring with his UK band, The Drivers, when he met Canadian guitarist Kevin McMichael. He was on the road with his band, Fast Forward. The two felt instant musical chemistry and made a promise. If things ever fell apart, they'd start something together. Well, things did fall apart pretty soon after. The Drivers had scored Canadian hits, then a label scandal blew it all up. Van Eat returned to Sussex, England, defeated. But McMichael kept the pact and showed up at Heathrow Airport with his guitar and moved into Van Eat's parents' spare room. Together, they began building a new band from scratch. In 1986, they signed with Siren Records and added bassist Colin Farley and drummer Martin Beadle. Cutting Crew entered the studio with producer Terry Brown, who had worked with Rush. Brown called the sessions a complicated process that worked out in the end somehow. But when Virgin tried to rush out I Just Died in Your Arms, Van Eat drew a line in the sand right then and there. The New York recording, it just wasn't sounding right to him. He told the label, if you release it, I'm going to walk. So they rebooted in London, and Brown recut the track piece by piece. That Brink of Disaster ultimatum became a #1 smash. I Just Died in Your Arms. It hit the top of the Hot 100 for 2 weeks in 1987 and reached #4 on the mainstream rock chart. The next single, I've Been in Love Before, that was a top 10 hit as well, went to #9. One for the Mockingbird reached number 38 and was a huge radio hit. The album Broadcast, that peaked at number 16 on the Billboard 200. Sadly, though, the momentum didn't last. Cutting Crew's follow-up, The Scattering, that arrived late in 1989. Van Eed later said the delay and the label dynamics killed their buzz completely. Sales stalled, and after their 1992 album Campus Mentis, McMichael left and pivoted to a second act with Robert Plant, co-writing and touring for Fate of Nations. 3 more albums followed, but none would rise to the same stature of their debut record. When Kevin McMichael died of cancer in 2002, it closed a bittersweet chapter on a partnership that almost never happened. Van Eed, for his part, has kept the Cutting Crew name alive with various lineups over the years, touring with a lot of best of 80s outfits. But the magic of that first album, Forged in a Spare Room with a Bar Napkin Promise, could never be recaptured. But man, we'll forever remember that moment. I Just Died in Your Arms, that first album. This is what Nick told me about their biggest hit.
I'm not religious at all. I'm a very spiritual person, and I totally believe in the muse. I think there is a thing where you get touched every now and again. It may happen once a month, it may happen once a year, it may happen 6 times a day, I don't know. But you've got to tune into it. And I firmly believe that when you get lucky that way, or you open all your things to let it bring in, it comes in. But then it's your responsibility to go, I recognize that, that's pretty good. Because most times we're too busy, we're on, I remember writing down words sometimes, and I think, oh my God, where do those words go? That was the muse again, and it's gone forever. But with Died in Your Arms and Been in Love Before, and maybe 5 or 6 other songs I've written in my life, that came from nowhere. And you have a responsibility then to go, I'm going to get this down. And I don't know how many other people have told you that in interviews, but I'm 58 now, and I'm an older man, and looking back, I totally see that. You get this, and if you're a fool if you don't take those.
All right, heading into the number 3 spot, it's a teen queen pop idol who is in the middle of a massive resurgence as you watch this due to Stranger Things. I got Tiffany. Before I Think We're Alone Now became a cultural phenomenon, Tiffany's first single, Danny, it went absolutely nowhere. It actually failed to chart, and the young singer's career seemed dead on arrival. But her manager, a guy named George Tobin, he had a radical idea, one that would change pop music marketing forever. The Mall Tour. I Think We're Alone Now was released on August 16, 1987, and Mall Mania went into full effect. Of course, you could never do that now because malls aren't a thing anymore, really. So without even getting the label's blessing first, Tiffany set out to perform in malls across America. It was an unconventional strategy, but man, it worked beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Radio stations were flooded with listener requests, and the Tommy James and the Shondells cover blew up big time. It went to number 1 here. It went to number 1 in Canada. It went to number 1 in the UK, Ireland, New Zealand, South Africa, Panama, and pretty much top 10 around the world. And Tiffany was only 16 years old when she found herself in the top 5 alongside her heroes, Madonna and Michael Jackson and Fleetwood Mac and Billy Idol. Now, Tiffany's self-titled debut, that was released in May of 1987. It produced a second number 1 hit as well, Could Have Been. The album sold about 4 million copies, with Tiffany becoming the youngest female artist in Billboard history to have an album hit number 1. Now, her second LP, Hold an Old Friend's Hand, that came out in November of '88 with 2 top 40 hits. All This Time peaked at number 6, and Radio Romance reached number 35. And sadly, this is where things started to fall apart. At just 16, Tiffany filed a highly publicized petition to become an emancipated minor, freeing herself from the control of her mother and her manager who had shacked her with a bad contract. But the legal battle slowed her career momentum at exactly the wrong time. By the time she put out her third album, October of 1990, Tiffany was 18 and trying to pivot to a more mature sound. None of the singles charted from the album, and the rebrand from teen pop icon to adult artist had failed. With it went her commercial viability, too. Tiffany spent the rest of the 90s largely out of the spotlight. Then she appeared in that one gentleman's magazine that I can't say on here. It rhymes with Clay Boy. She said she appeared in the magazine to try and fix her image problem. She never had another hit, though. There is a cool ending to this, though. She reemerged in 2000 with The Color of Silence, which Billboard called one of the best pop albums of the year. But, it seemed her mainstream moment had passed from there. But recently, Tiffany's cover of I Think We're Alone Now is enjoying a major pop culture resurgence, and I love to see it. Of course, its inclusion in the season 5 of Stranger Things is a big deal. Hit number 1 on the Shazam charts overnight, being rediscovered by a new generation of fans, and man, more to come, I think. Here's what she told me in an interview. Shopping mall tour. That was kind of a brilliant idea for that moment.
Yeah, that's where I hung out. I mean, it made total sense.
Yeah.
Danny, the single, was released. That was the first single, and it wasn't doing well at radio. And that's when George decided to just totally change it and put on I Think We're Alone Now. And that started getting traction because there probably wouldn't have been a mall tour without that happening first.
Yeah.
And, he had some radio connections and pretty much as a friend said, spin this. I'm doing this Rogue without the labels, consent, but this is the wrong single. I knew it was the wrong single. It's really, I Think We're Alone Now. So they started testing it on a favor and we started getting people calling in.
All right, coming in at number 2, I have one of the most perplexing bands of all time, The Laws. Everything about The Laws revolved around frontman Lee Mavers and his uncompromising vision. So formed in 1984, this Liverpool jangle pop band released their first single, Way Out, in 1987. As they toured the UK, they drew immediate comparisons to the Beatles. In 1988, they released their most famous song, There She Goes, one of the best of its time. The track got moderate airplay, but stiffed on the UK charts at number 59. And then came Timeless Melody in May of '89. Test pressings went out, and New Musical Express nominated it for Record of the Week. But then Mavers killed it. He hated the song's production, so the single was scrapped before it was released. Can you believe that? He threw away a massive hit there. This was the beginning of a pattern that would overshadow the band for years to come and destroy them. So from 1987 to 1990, The Laws spent an agonizing off and on 4-year stretch recording their debut album. Producers came and went, and the band's lineup repeatedly changed, with only Mavers and John Power staying constant. It was total madness. Nobody could satisfy Mavers' impossible standards. By 1989, things stabilized with Lee's brother Neil on drums and Peter Kamel, who was on lead guitar. In December, they entered London's Eden Studios with famous producer Steve Lillywhite. He produced Simple Minds and U2. Despite this, Mavers still wasn't satisfied. Eventually, their label, Go Discs, who had spent serious money on the band, they'd had enough. After spending £1 million, burning through 7 producers and scrapping 12 recording sessions, they confiscated the masters and released the album against Mavers' will. Not surprisingly, he hated it, and he called it garbage in promotional interviews. Can you imagine? He's in an interview saying his album sucked. Lee later claimed the band had deliberately played poorly during sessions, hoping to sabotage the material. But in stark contrast to Lee Mavers' opinion, critics loved the record. The album hit number 30 in the UK. There She Goes was re-released in 1990 and went all the way to number 13. Additional singles, Timeless Melody and Feelin', they both reached the UK top 40. In America, There She Goes went to number 49 on the Hot 100, but went to number 2 on the alternative charts. Throughout the 90s, There She Goes gained traction from film spots like So I Married an Axe Murderer and The Parent Trap and Girl Interrupted. It also scored a prominent placement in Gilmore Girls and a top 40 cover by Sixpence None the Richer. This one song in itself was enough to make The Laws indie darlings in America. Today, it boasts nearly 500 million streams on Spotify and 1 billion all the way around. But in the end, only one official studio album was ever released. Fatigued by Mavers' perfectionism, the band, they just gave up. They were frustrated with him torpedoing their career at every turn. John Power finally just quit and the band limped along until they dissolved completely in 92. But get this, we could have had at least 2 more albums from The Laws. 35 additional songs from the band were already completed. So where are they? Well, Lee Mavers, he physically destroyed them all after they finished recording them. The Laws should have been massive. Instead, Lee Mavers turned what should have been a legendary career into the ultimate one-and-done nostalgia act. He literally destroyed his own music so nobody could ever hear it. The Laws became a footnote instead of actual history. So we made it all the way to number 1, and for this one, I've got maybe the biggest what-if band ever, Mother Love Bone. Their story centers around Andrew Wood, who was a fixture in the Seattle rock scene in the 80s. He started out with the band Malfunction, one of the early players in the grunge movement. By the late 80s, 3 guys from another Seattle act, Green River, started up a cover band called Lords of the Wasteland. Their names were Stone Gossard, Jeff Ament, and Bruce Fairweather. They were just messing around playing other people's songs. But for vocals, they recruited Andrew Wood, who he was in his early 20s at this point. He was already one of rock's most charismatic showmen. It wasn't long before the guys realized they could be more than a cover band. They had true potential. So they brought in Greg Gilmore, a powerhouse drummer who had done time with Skin Yard and 10 Minute Warning, and they started writing originals. Lords of the Wasteland was then renamed Mother Love Bone. If you saw Andrew Wood perform, you understood why this band was different. This guy was a rock cartoon character in the best way possible. Outrageous clothes, dreamy lyrics, all theatrics. He made every show feel like a must-see event. Andrew Wood brought the whole package. He could command a room without even trying. By late 1988, Mother Love Bone was one of Seattle's hottest prospects. The buzz was real here. Every show was packed. In November, they landed the deal with Polygram's Polydor label. March of 1989 brought their debut EP, Shine, and Mother Love Bone became the first band from Seattle's new generation to release music on a major label. Before Soundgarden, before Nirvana, before Alice in Chains, the record sold well and cranked up the hype, and late 1989 found them cutting their full-length debut, Apple. By this point, the anticipation in the Seattle scene had reached a fever pitch. This was it. Mother Love Bone was about to break out big time. The label was behind them, the songs were there, the timing was perfect, it was all coming together. Then tragedy struck. With Apple's release date approaching, Andrew Wood overdosed on heroin. On March 16, 1990, his girlfriend found him unresponsive. For 2 agonizing days, Andrew Wood remained on life support at Haberview Medical Center, and reportedly, Andrew Wood was actually showing signs of improvement. That is, until he wasn't. Why things took a turn for the worse, it remains a mystery to this day. There's an unexplained 10-hour gap in the hospital records, specifically nurses' notes, which went missing. Some close to Wood believed that he had a severe allergic reaction to the medication he was given, causing fatal brain swelling. So tragically, on March 19th, with Queen's A Night at the Opera playing softly in the background, Andy's loved ones just let him go. He was only 24. Mother Love Bone's album, Apple, it dropped 4 months later, on July 19, 1990. Critics praised it. The songs were incredible. The potential was undeniable. But without Andrew Wood, none of it mattered. The band was finished. Andrew's bandmates Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament joined Soundgarden's Chris Cornell for Temple of the Dog, an Andrew Wood tribute project. Of course, they went on to form Pearl Jam, and the rest is history. Mother Love Bone should have been massive. They had it all. The songs, the talent, the timing. Instead, they became rock's greatest what if. Just go back and listen to Chloe Dancer, Crown of Thorns, one of the greatest epics ever written. That last one's a tough one because I think Andrew would have been one of the biggest frontmen ever. And Chloe Dancer, Crown of Thorns, it's in my 10 favorite songs ever. It hits you right here. So there it is. 8 acts that could have been much bigger. What do you think? What are your memories of these acts? What are your memories of these songs or any other acts that we should cover? A lot of people requested a part 2, so here it is. Would you like a part 3? Let's have a great discussion below. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.